Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Most of the people assume that Hindu philosophy is one coherent, cohesive philosophy. And I don't blame them because most of the people are not aware there's a multi-aspected philosophy. There is one philosophy which is heterogeneous, no homogeneity in this. Of course, the Brahminical class, which was very, very powerful at one time, tried to project only one aspect. But in reality, it's a mixture of different thoughts. And as we are aware that the thoughts can never be homogeneous. They differ from person to person, from one philosopher to another philosopher. So while on the one side we have the world famous concept of karma, which most of the people don't understand incidentally, because karma means action. Anyway, this aspect which was suppressed was hedonism. It's just like the Greek philosophy of Epicure. If you remember, last time I had talked of the correlation or the similarities between the Greek and the Indian mythology. But it's not only the mythology, it's even the philosophy. Now, Charvaka is also called Lokayata, which is Sanskrit for the worldly ones. And that is a philosophical Indian school of materialists, just like Epicures. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. The Indian school of materialism, Charvaka, rejected the notion of an afterworld. They rejected the concept of karma. They rejected the concept of salvation, moksha. They also rejected the authority of the sacred scriptures, the Vedas. For them, Vedas were just a book. You read it, if you want it, adopt it, if you don't want it, reject it. And most importantly, they rejected the concept of the soul, immortality. Can you believe that the Indian philosophers, and a large number of them, saying goodbye to the spiritual aspect, to the concept of karma, to the concept of salvation, because most of the Hindus and the foreigners have been brought up in a staple diet that the Hindu philosophy is only concerned with that. Now, Charvaka, also known as Lokayata, is an ancient school of Indian materialism, hedonism, Epicureanism, whatever you want to call it. And it's heterodox school of Indian philosophy, very revolutionary. Charvaka holds direct perception, empiricism of life, and conditional inference as a proper source of knowledge. Now imagine it, the conditional inference, that is the underlying concept. Nothing what is stated by the authorities is to be taken at the face value. Everything you have got to examine, and this scientific approach, test, examine, accept or reject. Now this philosophy embraces philosophical skepticism and rejects spiritualism and supernaturalism because they are inexplicable. Reason, logic doesn't explain that. And anything which cannot be explained according to Charvaka is said to be rejected because that's unscientific. So Charvaka's hedonism is basically an elixir of life and happiness, and giving precedence to what meets the eye and turns our back on what is beyond belief, beyond our knowledge, beyond our perception. If you can perceive with the five senses, fine. Otherwise, reject it. That's philosophy. And this ethics, this school of ethics, I call it. Now you might think that ethics is morality. No, it's not. Ethics is a school of thought and deals with how to live. So the Charvaka's followers and this philosophy says, live and enjoy life. Sensual pleasures are the only true purpose of human experience. And there is no obligation for an afterlife or for karma. No. In Indian philosophy, Charvaka may be called hedonistic. For him, pleasure is the highest goal. Highest goal of life is pleasure, not moksha, not salvation. And some Indian thinkers speak of the four ends of human life. Four ends, purusharth. Namely, you should be wealthy, earn wealth. Secondly, use karma for pleasure. Dharma and liberation, moksha. So those four ends are there, but hedonism, as Charvaka's philosophy, is purely wealth and pleasure. So as long as you live happily, beg, borrow, or steal. Now, I was impressed by this statement in Charvaka Darshan. This is an excellent book which most of the people unfortunately have not read. And Charvaka writes, it's a maxim. Live happily, beg, borrow, steal, but relish ghee. Ghee is a clarified butter. That means absolutely physical pleasures. Now, this Charvaka Darshan, if you have read it, doesn't actually reflect on the universality of sukhva. The word uses sukhva. Sukh is happiness. And that is hedonism. And somewhat trivializes the profundity of this iconoclast school of Indic philosophy. Now, this school of philosophy is not something purely living at the level of animals. No, I want to clarify it very clearly. You have to understand that hedonism does not mean only animalistic life. You have to understand the concept of hedonism or Charvakaism. Hedonism is an ethical theory, Charvaka, that pleasure in a sense of satisfaction of desire is the highest goal and proper aim of life. What is it avail that you suffer from hunger, from pangs, from poverty, from deprivation, and then get a entry into heaven? That's bullshit according to Charvaka. And according to him, ethical or evaluative hedonism, evaluated, claim that only pleasure has worth and value. Pain and displeasure pain and pleasure have disvalue, the opposite of worth. Now, one Indic philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, he said that both psychological and ethical hedonism have their value. And he says, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. So you have to choose pain or pleasure, and Charvaka says, for a better life, for a happy life, it's better to choose pleasure. Now, I must mention that hedonism is not an exclusive idea. As I said, Charvaka in the East and Epicure in the Greek, they had the same thought, the same concepts. And the people who have not Charvaka, they think that this hedonism is just sensual, carnal, lust, corporeal, and it's too general an understatement. The philosophy is much deeper, that the humans need to stop desiring everything they don't naturally need. So what you naturally don't need, stop desiring it. Most of us, and we know it, have hankering after things we don't need. We just go to the market, supermarket, mall, buy it. We never study it. How does it contribute to the happiness? So you have got to evaluate everything, the contribution to your gross domestic happiness, GDH. And when you can evaluate it and you find that that acquisition is good, then okay, go ahead and do it. But don't hanker after things you don't require. And because that is the bit to fulfill all utterly elusive desires. And when you follow the elusive desires, you tend to lose the simplest joys that constitute a healthy and fulfilling existence. So what you need is a healthy existence, fulfilling existence, happiness, but not covetousness, not greed. Now it's like that Urdu couplet I read somewhere, na khuda na mila na visale sanam, na idhar ke nahe na udhar ke hum. Neither did I realize God, nor did I find the company of my beloved. I lost both the friends. So you have got to choose. Don't try to sail in two boats. Now, let's look at another aspect of Charvaka, which is ignored. The hedonism of Charvaka has a humanitarian streak. Charvaka was very clear. He believed that joyful existence needs nothing else but individualistic happiness, because that can pave the way to universal happiness. If in a society everybody is happy, the society as a whole is happy. And that's why I say Bhutan as a country has the highest GDH, gross domestic happiness. That's the paramount importance. No individual seems to be intrinsically happy. Even the people who are the richest, they are not happy. So it's not the acquisition, it is acquisition with a hope and desire and the aim of getting happy. So you cannot be lost in the vortex of life. You have to discern when joys come tiptoeing. But if you don't catch them, they will go away. You have got to catch, as they say, the proverb is catch time by the forelock. You have to catch joys also as they come and not let them slip by. Now, this is a universal lamentation led by every individual towards the fag end of his life. I did not do this, so I'm unhappy. Why the hell you did not do it? Who stopped you? That's why the Charvakan philosophy comes. When the things come, don't start discussing it. If you think it can contribute to your happiness, do it. What we have gained in the life of this rat race of so-called success and accomplishments, sadly, we have gained nothing. The result is zero, nada. But what we have done in the process, we have deprived ourselves of life that gives little joys and miraculous pleasures. And Charvaka philosophy is, don't let those pleasures slip you. The Charvakan philosophy is not to resist or resent the natural flow of happiness. For happiness is but an occasional episode, I always say, in the general term of pain of life. Ergo, life has to be enjoyed to the hilt, in pleasure, and welcome all that is good. This is grateful acceptance of positive energy. The gratitude of being alive by itself should give you happiness. And to make that happiness, compound that happiness, enjoy all the good things of life. Now, what are we human beings? Sullen-faced, sulking souls, because we have too much in our plates, too much of the ethical conundrum of good and bad, moral and immoral life. That's why I say the two words that need to be banished from the dictionary are should and ought to. Why should we do something? Why we ought to? That palpable vibrancy and vivaciousness is seriously lacking in our lives. We are too serious. Stevenson says, what this life is full of care, we have no time to stand and stare. And that stand and stare is the basic ingredient of Charvaka philosophy. A measured hedonistic approach to life has great advantage. It can bring life back to the strange exuberance. Happiness has left you. So, adopt that measure in the spoonfuls of life. T.S. Eliot, the famous British poet, talks of the life living in teaspoons. So those teaspoons of happiness, Charvaka says, don't let them slip by. Mind you, Charvaka's hedonism is not bohemianism. It's not nihilistic. Basically, it is an elixir of existentialism. And existentialism not of having that tinge of sadness and moroseness and dejection, but existentialism of universal happiness. Now, there's the difference between the Greek philosophy of Epicureans and Charvaka. The Greek philosophy was purely individualistic. Charvaka is more of societal in nature. Individual is important, but individual not as an ascetic, not as a person living in a jungle by himself. There's no happiness. You have to be a part of society. And as a part of society, be happy and make others happy. This concept of Indian philosophy of hedonism is in fact the biggest factor that can contribute to GDH and replace GDP. As a matter of fact, I remember when I talked to the king of Bhutan way back in 1962, 63, and we talked of this concept. And then Bhutan became the pioneer country, which later on, in 80s, the UN adopted. And the gross domestic happiness is more important than gross domestic product GDP. So that is what's important. And this aspect of the Hindu philosophy is in fact one of the most revolutionary concepts that has to be adopted, or should be adopted. I am not one of those people say everybody, but I'm explicating this philosophy as a major aspect of Indic philosophy. I won't call it Hindu because some people are allergic to the word Hindu. So this Indic philosophy concept of hedonism is a great contribution to the schools of philosophy and has an important role to play in the development of the thought pattern of the human beings. Thank you.